Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Voyager's Guide to Ravean kind of world building videos. In this video we're going to take a look at the Dokae Kingdom in kind of a greater overview of kind of what it looks like and how they operate, and then we'll look into the various regions of this kind of actual nation, and that'll be kind of the entirety of the nations of Ravean handled. So from here we'll be able to look into a few different things. But for now, let's take a look at the Dokae Kingdom. So, the Dokae Kingdom is a nation of mystery and secrets. This is the territory that is like relatively new on the world stage here. It is a dense, mostly untamed jungle nation that has loose association of settlements that make up the nation itself. Basically, before it was the actual Dokae Kingdom, there was a bunch of, to some extent, city-state colonies of people that had just tried to settle the territory on their own capabilities. And then now the Dokae Kingdom has come in and they have become the unified governing force of all of these settlements. Basically just kind of keeping control and understanding what they're looking at from this perspective as kind of a overarching management of the territory as a whole. So their government structure is organized into a monarchy. They have a number of militaristic hallmarks to their organization, with their queen, their first queen, Queen Melistre of the Dokae Kingdom, uniting the widespread settlements under her banner through the leverage of her most trusted officials that have now taken up very distinct posts. Basically, there's a tripod of sorts of this power with her at the top. There is the High National Intelligence Officer, the High Inquisitor, and the High General. These three positions make it possible for her to rule throughout the entirety of the territory by the use of powerful information, management of that information, and inquisitions, and then punishment or management of whatever else might be needed. The interesting thing about this area is that higher or more concentrated military forces, while powerful, have to move on a relatively rapid basis through jungle territory, which is harsh territory most of the time. And so massive scale wars aren't typically possible. And so even if it were, the smaller nation kind of city-states that have settled into the Dokae Kingdom territory tend to not have individuals that would make up a traditional army. And so individuals that would be serving as militaristic forces end up being powerful and small teams. And so they're able to move very quickly through the territory, even in the dense jungle, to be able to actually do what needs to be done. Now that means that for the most part, the people of whatever city-state a militaristic group goes to in kind of a squadron, this squadron is not actually enough to overwhelm the populace in terms of numbers, but that's where the information power comes in. The High National Intelligence Officer oversees kind of regional intelligence officers as they perform and distribute educational efforts. Now, that sounds pretty good to some extent. The citizens of the nation are given education. They are given a chance to learn and understand, but they have significant kind of approved ways that they are allowed to learn and things that they are allowed to teach. Things that each individual is capable of learning, but it's kind of the approved textbook. And so the approved textbook is not necessarily always the best reflection of history itself, but it does make for the most part, educated, well-read people. Now, they also quietly oversee within these posts the procurement of international knowledge in the form of government infiltration and espionage. This works between both city-states, where they're looking to understand things. Say a prominent new mayor has come to power, and they're looking to make sure that this individual is able to be controlled. And so they say, hey mayor, we just learned that you have a daughter. Really hope that everything goes well for her, right? And so it's kind of a strong arm of, we know that you have a weak point and we can leverage it. We are capable. So the Dokae Kingdom, in terms of kind of its overarching structure, works weirdly like the mob, where, you know, this is a nice place you have here. It would be a shame if anything happened. And because there's so many more dangers within the jungle territory for different city-states to actually handle, they don't really mess with it. And if they can be on the supporting side of the Dokae Kingdom government and Queen Melistre, then why not? It's effectively the entirety of the Legend of Korra at the very end there, when they're talking about and dealing with Kuvira. That's kind of how it is. Queen Melistre has set herself up to be a more successful version of Kuvira, where she has people that are capable of taking things down very quickly in terms of spies, espionage, and military force to some extent. And other people are already struggling with other hazards to the point where they can't afford to oppose her. The next one of this kind of tripod here is the High Inquisitor, though. It is the second highest legal official of the Dokae Kingdom outside of the Queen herself. At least the High Inquisitor is. The High Inquisitor is kind of a legal official that oversees the creation and implementation of new laws and practices within the Dokae Kingdom itself. They work with regional Inquisition officers and the Dokae Kingdom's military to implement these regulations to keep the peace. So basically, between this High Inquisitor and the Queen, and them working relatively closely together, they develop new laws and strategies for the Dokae Kingdom, and then rely on additional individuals on the local level and on the military level to enforce these laws. And now this can be done, you know, with the aid of policing forces within the individual kind of nation, city-state groups. You know, they'll have a small town guard or something. Even if it's like a Minutemen militia, they'll have something, and to some extent, these military guards will be able to step in and be like, do this. And they will usually follow the order. Otherwise, the High General of the Dokae Kingdom oversees the acquisition and military organization of the Dokae Kingdom itself. Now, it's not just the political minds of the kingdom, but also in the general's hands that a lot of this power and control comes to be. The High General works with regional sergeants to maintain the structure of the military across the territory, as well as the enforcement of laws in an effort to keep the peace. Basically, this is the strong and long arm of the law. Information is power, and these are the individuals that implement the understanding that you need to recognize the power that the Dokae Kingdom has from a government perspective. Refusing to understand and refusing to work with them means that individuals from the military, even if they aren't necessarily a massive military powerful brute force group, can and will mess up everything that a city-state and our rulers have worked for. The Queen Melistre herself then works with these offices, these three offices, as they serve as advisors within her court, as well as international entities to develop healthy international relationships while maintaining a relatively reclusive and independent nation in their own right. The Queen has, however, the ultimate authority on law, military action, and community outreach efforts, with her will proving to be the most important within the court. Though cleverly, she often needs the advice of her advisors in office, not ignoring their expertise within their own fields. Basically, while she does have ultimate say, she's not too dumb. She's clever enough to understand that she will want capable people at her side. Now, the interesting thing is basically the Dokae Kingdom wants to be an enigma, which means that while they're the new people, they're the new kid on the block, nobody really knows for sure what's going on with them within their territory, and they would like to keep it that way. And information that leaks and gets out to the rest of the world is sometimes unavoidable, but they will do what they can to keep it from leaking out into the other parts of the world. In terms of the national history, the Dokae Kingdom is new, like I've been saying here. they've only been living within their united national territory for maybe a few decades. In the year 2965 post-deliverance, the Queen Melistre rose to power under the influence of her father and his teammates. After her father died in his efforts to establish control over the Dokae territory, his team appointed his daughter, Queen Melistre, to the newly created throne, as they took the role of her regent advisors to the fledgling ruler. Being a young girl, she was only about 13 years old at the time, and the queen proved herself before too long, developing a stern and measured attitude towards ruling her nation. By the year 2970 post-deliverance, the young queen came of age and took up her throne as the rightful ruler of the Dokae Kingdom. When she did, she rolled out a great number of policies very quickly. The most controversial of which was the isolationist provision, which separated the people of the Dokae region from the rest of the world by limiting trade with only the necessary trading nations to maintain positive relationships to the Dokae territory. The secondary policy that she ended up implementing proved to be a danger to the fledgling nation, was the rapid establishment of inquisitors within the region, as well as the recruitment of military forces to fill out the meager military and policing forces established by her regents. Soon after this was completed, the most dangerous part of the Inquisition actually began. In the year 2972, the start of a sort of cleansing began under the guise of removing dangerous factions of anarchists and lawbreakers from the Dokae territory. During this time, a number of people were rounded up and subjected to legal trials and interrogations meant to suss out their allegiances, and especially to quarry dream spirits, as the Kalashtar people were seen as a risk to national security of this nation. The inherent telepathic abilities of the race boasted, as well as their remarkable similarity to the regular humans, made them a threat, something that they couldn't necessarily ignore. This would prove to be somewhat dangerous, as over time this ball began to roll. And by the year 2980, the Kalashtar of the Dokae Kingdom were either completely cleansed from the landscape via the Inquisition, with many laying dead or imprisoned, or fleeing the country. They were otherwise, should they be free, manipulated to serve under the will of the crown. They were not the only targets of the Inquisition, however. Lizard folk, many fey races such as satyr, goblins, and more, plenty dangerous races such as orcs, hobgoblins, Goliath, and as well as really just about any reclusive species. Really any race that was not a vanilla base human was seen over time in rapid succession to be the next group that proved to be the most dangerous to the entirety of the kingdom. And this has led to the very rapid cleansing of anything that is not human, making the Dokae Kingdom a primarily, if not entirely, human territory. Soon after the cleansing, the Dokae Kingdom settled into a sort of peace, with the establishment of public programs like educational efforts, community development, and the development of infrastructure taking the forefront in people's minds. But there was a very clear message that was set within people's minds as well. Dissenters are a detriment to the nation as a whole. It was time for the people of the Dokae territory to do their part and turn in these anarchists wherever they hide, so that they might grow as a nation on the world stage. And that's effectively what's been happening ever since. These individuals have been slowly, almost like the Red Scare, turning in their friends, neighbors, loved ones as potential traitors or informants or spies that are helping individuals of different racial groups. And that has led for an almost entirely human-based population, with even some of these humans struggling against their neighbors as traitors, and those that would see a political gain or a business gain by throwing their rival business operator under the bus for helping one of these more dangerous races, seizing the opportunity to remove them from the playing field. The Dokae Kingdom has a few official holidays, though, in terms of kind of notable times of the year. The important holidays are really localized to the individual settlements, wherever they might be within the territory. The respectively isolated nature of these settlements and unified holidays is really not that possible. Basically, there's a history. And the history is more so not necessarily the national unified history at this point yet. It is the history of each individual settlement as it has eked out its way surviving in the dangerous jungle territories. These holidays are things like, Founding Day and other things like this that recognize individual settlements, people of interest, events of interest, harvests, everything like that. The nation has not been around long enough to have specific unified national holidays. Now, international relationships. The Dokae Kingdom is new, and it has a reputation to some extent that has affected its international relationships even still. So, its relationship to the Ramont Empire, it was positive in its early days, and the Inquisition that it implemented proved to be a relatively worrying policy for the Ramont Empire, as a number of refugees ended up fleeing to the Ramont Empire from the Dokae Kingdom. They ended up kind of becoming the place that was next closest nearby. If I take a second to look at the map here, the Ramont Empire is this Horsehead Peninsula space, and the Dokae Kingdom is kind of this southern half of that side of the map. And so for the most part, anybody that's going to flee is either going to flee via ship to one of the nearby nations like the Serac Wastes or the Ramont Empire through the Sapphire Seas, or if they're willing to, risk the dangerous trek on land by going overland or oversea through the Tangobark Sea and everything else kind of around this Horsehead Peninsula, they will end up finding themselves within the Lachlan Magocracy or within the Merc Coast very quickly, depending on whatever path they might take there. But pretty much anywhere along the southern half of the Ramont Empire especially was where a lot of these international refugees ended up fleeing from the Dokae Kingdom and settling. And so individuals of the Ramont Empire had no choice but to recognize that this was actually happening, and they weren't quite sure what was going on. Now, they want to investigate the Dokae Kingdom, and the Dokae Kingdom has had no choice otherwise but to implement international spies and government infiltrators to draw attention away from themselves and toward other nations. This is a misdirection attempt that has the potential to escalate to assassination of the Ramont royal family and the bloodline, should it be deemed necessary. Now, the Mistkeep Mining Guild, they don't really have a positive or negative feeling towards the Mistkeep Mining Guild. They see them as a nation of trade convenience, with a great number of metals and ores being purchased from the Mistkeep miners and craftsmen. Due to the distance, however, the trade relationship is not crucial. While it would be beneficial to maintain, it's quite a bit to get it around and get it to the Dokae Kingdom. And should the Dokae Kingdom deem it necessary, the agreement can be terminated at just about any time. The real purpose of the trade agreement is, as it stands, to maintain a positive relationship from the perspective of the Mistkeep Mining Guild. They want to maintain them as neutral, or at least friends, or whatever they can, in an effort to make sure that the Mistkeep doesn't come looking for information. They want their peace and quiet for now. The Lebet Empire is kind of somewhat interested in the Dokae Kingdom at this point. They're wary, the Dokae Kingdom is wary of the Lebet Empire, with much of the Lebet Empire's history proving to be both concerning and somewhat heartening. There's an opportunity for the fledgling nation here. While the Lebet Empire has been meddlesome with other nations in the past, they have never really been quite successful in their endeavors, and so the Dokae Kingdom must remain vigilant to prevent them from meddling in their own affairs. But a tentative relationship may allow for the opportunity to shift a potential conflict more heavily onto the shoulders of their new ally, the Lebet Empire. After all, what are friends for? Finally, the Serac Wastes. The Dokae Kingdom is hopeful to establish a stronger relationship to the Serac Wastes. but given a new shift in the Sultanate, they are very wary of their involvement so far with the new Sultan. Development from the trade perspective may prove to be there in kind of new Sultanate politics. They may have a chance to continue this trade agreement, but they aren't exactly sure. Now, due to the new Sultan's reluctance to pursue anything more than a reluctant business relationship with the Sarak Wastes here, there's kind of a recent Inquisition policy that has been brought up by this new Sultan who does not approve. Many of these refugee people have made it from the Dokae Kingdom to the Sarak Wastes, and that is something that cannot be fully ignored. And so that is something that the Sultan is recognizing as a potential danger or risk, or a policy that the Dokae Kingdom has that he does not agree with. As such, he wants to keep an eye on them and is reluctantly doing business for the sake of historical trade in the maintenance of some relationship. But he is otherwise careful enough to understand that things may not be the way that they seem otherwise. Well, that's it for the Dokae Kingdom overview. In the next video, we'll take a look at some of the regions here, starting with the Low Glade. Thank you all for watching, be good to one another, and I will see you all in the next video.